The time has come, it's 4:30. Welcome all after a short break. So let me introduce our next speaker. So besides Michał being our host today, on a daily basis, he also Agile Coach for Motorola Solutions. He's involved in organization level Agile transformations, leading communities of practice, and also driving large-scale retrospectives that are topic of his talk today. He will share his experience in setting up to this challenging endeavor, including design, process flow, facilitation technique, and much more. The small tip about him is if you really want to make him smile, just ask about his cat. And way no more, Michał, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much, Veronica. Let me share my screen.
Okay.
Can you see it?
Yes.
Okay. So first of all, I have to say thank you to Agile Swarming Committee for letting me speak at 4:30 p.m. on a busy conference. That's a time slot that every speaker dreams about. So thank you very much. That being said, this presentation has to be short and has to be entertaining. Otherwise, everybody's going to fall asleep. So today, I'm going to be talking about retrospectives, but not the ones that you do like at the end of the sprint, but very special ones. I call them organizational retrospectives. So in this short presentation, I'll try to share a bit of my experience, some tips and tricks on how to make your retrospectives valuable. We have very little time, so I'll be happy to continue this discussion on Slack channel. So let's get started. Now, first of all, if you think about a phrase, scaled retrospective, it may suggest that it's just a regular retrospective with some scaled flavor in it. That's completely wrong. There are a lot of examples in a daily life where if you add just one little word, you will drastically change the meaning of the entire phrase. So if you think about a bomb and atomic bomb, that's a huge difference. If you think about disco and disco polo, no matter how much I like Zenek Martyniuk, it's a huge difference with all respect to BGs here. And finally, referring to the title of this presentation, there's a huge difference between a chair and electric chair. You can sit on both, but you probably cannot stand up from the other one. And the same situation happens about retrospectives and scaled retrospectives. You may ask why, if I am an Agile coach or you're an Agile coach, why should I even bother about scaled retrospectives? And the answer is retrospectives are, to me, a product of Scrum. And your organization and my organization may be a lot more complex, a lot more complicated than that. So there are additional roles, additional communication paths, additional structures, whatever. That's the primary reason why we can even think about scaled retrospectives. And to be specific, there are at least 4 reasons to push your organization to retrospect. Or if you're an Agile coach, advertise scaled retrospectives. Firstly, in every team, there are problems that are beyond team's control, problems that the team simply cannot fix themselves, and they need to be elevated. Secondly, some problems in the organization are hard to acknowledge. That is, they have to be reported by several people or several teams in order for the stakeholders or management to finally acknowledge that they exist. Like I said before, in complex organizations, there are more roles than typical product owner, developer, and scrum master. And these roles may also have something interesting to say. So you have to respect them and take their voice, their opinion into account. And lastly, in a complex organization, optimizing things locally in a context of a team may be inoptimal. For example, the same problem may be fixed by two different teams two different ways. Or worse, one team can fix something that will introduce a breakage on the other team. So sometimes we have to fix things globally. Something's buzzing in my pocket. I think these are congratulations coming from all around the world. Now, I do have some personal experience about designing and facilitating such retrospectives. So let me share a few of these. Long time ago, when people breathed like the same air, we used to design post-safe effectiveness retrospectives. That is how our organization performed with safe and without safe. We did a few retrospectives in multi-team engineering organizations about their performance. Recently, we did a retrospective in the organization on the Scrum Master role. I think Olaf mentioned that in the beginning. We even had an episode of working with a financial organization about introducing lean. And there may be more examples here, but they have something in common. So they usually involve up to 100 participants. So that's way more than one Scrum team. They required a lot of preparation. And in the next part of the presentation, I will elaborate what kind of preparation we did. They involved multiple stakeholders. So it's not just product owner, Scrum Master, and a team, but also leaders, managers, people with function. And that results in high complexity of such retrospectives in general. And by the way, people who created Agile Swarming, many of them took part and designed these retrospectives together with me. So it's not just my my achievement, if you can call it achievement. And obviously, scaled retrospectives are difficult. In general, retrospectives are difficult, like the ones that you do in Scrum. And scale retrospectives are even more difficult. And why is that? Again, there are a couple of reasons that I learned. They don't happen automatically. They are, while regular retrospectives are embedded into Scrum framework, scaled retrospectives are not. Maybe SAFe mentions them, but that's all. So you have to work with your organization to make space for them and to acknowledge that they are important. There is no more, the process says we have to do retrospectives because there is no process for scaled retrospectives. Now, even bigger problem is that your stakeholders might not be interested in playing retrospectives because they are not used to, because they feel embarrassed, and because they are afraid to share control. They are embarrassed sometimes because some of them may think that they were employed to know what's right or wrong and to do things on their own with their own hands. So they may feel embarrassed that now you as an Agile coach want to discuss about what's wrong and what's right in their organization. I'm saying this because if you're an Agile coach, you have to make sure that you make them interested, that you reduce the fear, that you basically bring them on board. Of course, many stakeholders are not just a team. So whatever practices you knew from, you learned from regular retrospectives that happen on a development team, very often stakeholders are not a team. They are a group of individuals, they are a group of leaders. Sometimes they are even basically hostile, not very frequently. And lastly, my typical experience with retrospectives is that they focus a lot about problem finding, and they do not focus enough on problem solving. And we're going to get back to it in a minute. All the retrospectives that I did or that I participated in were completely different, because the organizations were different, because stakeholders were different, because the boundaries were different. However, there are some things that repeat, in my opinion, in a promising retrospectives at scale, that if you're an Agile coach, you may want to take them into account, basically. And we're going to dedicate each slide or two to these blocks. So we're going to be talking about facilitators of the retrospective, about some kind of a contract with the stakeholders, about useful facilitation tools, about how to deal with problems and actions, and lastly, how to conclude the retrospective at scale to make it worth. Okay. This one is easy. I would never be able to run any retrospectives of that kind alone, myself. So if you want to do this, you first want to make sure that you have a group of people that will, board this ship with you. And these may be fellow Scrum Masters or fellow Agile coaches from your company, especially if it's a large company. I realized that it was a good idea to employ somebody from the inside of the organization, because it reduces the gap and it reduces the fear between yourself facilitating and the people playing the retrospective game. If they see their fellow insiders playing the same game or facilitating it with you, they gain more trust, basically. Alternatively, however, I've never tried that. You may want to think about completely external coach or external facilitator. I don't know, maybe you know somebody famous or somebody very talented who may want to come and facilitate it for you. I have never tried that, so it's questionable. However, you probably can't design and run this yourself. And then what I did and what I think is crucial is that before we start engaging people from the organization into any retrospective game, we need to meet with the stakeholders, with the people who probably asked you for this retrospective, or who basically have some governance over the organization being retrospected. And you have to establish some basic building blocks, some basic highlights of the retrospectives to be held. So firstly, we have to ask the stakeholders why. We have to ask them, what is the reason that they are even asking for a retrospective? What happened? What is it that they see that led them to thinking about retrospective? When we capture that, you have to talk with the stakeholders about the engagement level. What is it that we want from these people? Are we just asking them for feedback? Like they will tell what's right, what's wrong, and they will go? Or maybe we want to ask the people in the retrospective for more formal problem statements, right? Like a more formal way of phrasing a problem. Or maybe we want to ask the people not only for problems, but also for actions. Or you can think that management will take the actions themselves. That's also fine, but you have to establish that. And even bigger engagement level, how about we ask them for not only problem definition, not only action definition, but also action ownership. That is transferring the control from the management to the people from the organization to take ownership for actions. And it's not only that, but also the stakeholders themselves need to understand what they will do in the retrospective. Will they just sit and watch? That's okay. Will they not even come to the room? That's also okay. Will they play the same game as everybody else to show partnership and to show alignment with the organization? That's also okay. But the worst thing we can do is to basically surprise the stakeholders in the meeting with something undesired, or so to speak, right? And lastly, since we are doing this retrospective for a larger organization, people will ask about effort. People will ask about how much it may cost. Because at the same time, they are not doing projects, they are not doing software development, they are not whatever. So it's nice to talk about how costly it may be. And when you capture that, what I did is we did some brainstorm about what is the set of questions we might ask to the people from the organization that would result in the engagement. So if you want them to talk about problems, what kind of questions are we going to ask them so that they spit out the problems? And immediately after, you may want to think about communication barriers. That is, what would happen so that people don't want to speak in the retrospective, like presence of managers or lack of drinking water, or maybe the language used. When people see the management or the stakeholders or some, stakeholders, they may not be willing to speak so easily. So you have to design your retrospective so that they speak before you run it. And lastly, what is it that this retrospective is supposed to conclude with? And when we capture all those questions, what we did with the people from the company, we came back to the management after a few days, proposing to them some retrospective design and flow. So basically, we told them, hey, we listened to you, we agreed on some boundaries of this retrospective, and this is how we think we may run it, and this is your role, dear management, this is your role in the retrospective. Do you like it or not? And then we discuss. So it's an iterative process. However, you have to have it done before we ask 100 people to play some game. And there's probably a lot of Scrum Masters and Agile coaches here in the meeting, so you probably know those tools. However, if you're looking for a starting point, some tools are generally more useful than others, and definitely liberating structures that are basically methods for facilitating large meetings, they come in handy, especially the crowdsourcing, 25/10, 1-to-4 all, Tris or Conversation Cafe, and probably a few more, but I have some experience using those. They may be extremely useful about controlling your retrospective at scale. Same about Menti, that is interactive presentations and polls, and same about basically using breakout rooms, but that's pretty obvious. The next building block that we may want to think about, and it's actually one of the central points of your retrospective, is identification of problems and actions. Unfortunately, and it's also my inefficiency, most retrospectives I did and most retrospectives I've seen focus on discovering problems, not actions. So, you know, people stick the sticky notes, they group them if they are similar, they use the markers to draw circles, and they are very good identifying problems. However, when it comes to actions, people are tired, people are not so much effective. At least that's my experience. Not to mention that problems are safe to discover. There is no commitment following discovering problem. You discover problem and, well, maybe the management will take it, right? Even, you know, most of the retrospective techniques that I know, including liberating structures, they focus on discovering problems. So problem discovery is easy. If you ask 100 people organization, they will immediately generate 500 problems for you. That's really easy. And the problem is that only actions matter. Only actions change your organization, not problem generation. And I found it useful to realize that there are at least two kinds of actions. These are decisions, or you may say enablers, and there are activities that you can do. And we'll talk about it in a minute. So we have to realize that problem definition and action definition are two completely different things. In one of the in one of the recent retrospectives, okay, not so much recent, but in one of the retrospectives that we did, we even separated them with time. So we had two meetings. One of them was about problem definition, and then we stopped. And then we let people go home and breathe and think and reset. And then we met again in a day or two, and we asked them to think about actions, because cumulating problems and actions in the scaled retrospectives may be simply too much. Whatever design we use for a retrospective, there are some questions that help identify problems. And they might be helpful in the retrospective to basically catch the problem. They are also helpful to convince your stakeholders, your management, that we do have a problem. Because your stakeholders very often challenge stuff. They ask, why do you think it's a problem? Or how can I even spot this problem? So if I engage the organization from problem definition, I am asking them, how do you know it's a problem? What is it that you see? What are the consequences or impact of this problem? What is the reason for the problem? And why it may be difficult to solve it? You can think about other questions, but the general rule is that we have to nail down what the problem is in probably more than one sentence. Like, my computer is not working, right? Or I don't know, there's too much work. When I said about activities and decisions, you can also call decisions enablers. And typically your management is very good taking decisions. You may use your stakeholders, you may use your management to enable your activities. So some people present in the retrospective, they have know-how and they have time, but they need decision to take activity. So decisions are basically like changing law, right? You're changing the law in order to enable some activities. In the retrospective meeting, if you design it that way, you want to decide who takes the leadership on activities and who is going to assign to decisions. So the benefit of having your management in the room is that they can take decisions immediately or not. There's no follow-up needed, probably. And lastly, if we define actions, sorry, it is worth to think about how we can verify in time that what we did was successful. that our activities or decisions were the right ones. Easier said than done, obviously. Yeah, so like I said, your management and your leadership team is probably most competent and powerful about enablers. This is their job. This is something that they have been trained in, and this is something that is like a life and soul of the work of their job. Action stage is a lot more difficult than problem stage, to a degree that you can consider separating these stages in time. From my experience, it's sometimes better to have one well-defined action than 20 or 30 poorly defined. Like, I don't know, Stefan will check if something, blah, blah, blah. And something that we've already discussed, but I have to put some emphasis on that. Problem discovery doesn't really matter without taking actions, activities, and decisions. The very last building block before I tell you goodbye is the retrospective conclusion. So before we run this retrospective, we have to design what is the scale retrospective supposed to end with. My examples were what you see in the picture. So the facilitators communicated the actions to everyone. The management, the stakeholders said thank you to everybody, and they communicated the next follow-up, the next checkpoint to assess progress. Also, the management team, they committed to informing the entire organization about what's been worked on, what's been agreed upon, and basically the course of action. And also the stakeholders committed to meeting with action owners on a regular basis, saying appreciation, asking what help they needed, and basically having some sync up. Because if we don't do this, the action owners may lose interest. For example, there is some other important thing that they've been asked to do, or they forgot, or they are too busy, whatever. So I think it's a nice practice that some of the management team keeps the pace with action owners and basically keeps track of the actions and activities and decisions taken. We have very little time, so that's probably everything I can compress to like 30 minutes. I'll be happy to continue this discussion offline or maybe at some other occasion, because there's definitely more to explore. Thank you very much, guys.